What's going on, guys? Sharpshot here. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. So today's video I'll be ranking all 116 survivor perks by category. Ranking all the survivor perks in DBD is pretty overwhelming if it's all in one big tier list. So I decided to divide all of the perks up by category so that the perks are being compared to perks with similar value. And if you were to go make a build and pick the best perks out of each category, you would end up with an amazing build. There's 9 categories that I split all of the perks up into. The first one is exhaustion, and these are perks that all use the exhaustion status effect. The second category is healing, and these are going to be perks that involve healing yourself or others and are deemed altruistic. The third category is generators, and these are perks that apply their value onto gens or speed up generator progress. The fourth category is information, and these are perks that show auras of things around the trial or give off visual or sound cues for information. The fifth category is boost, and these perks boost other categories for you or your teammates, and these can include boosting action speeds or status effects, for example. The sixth category is stealth, and these are perks that are used to hide scratch marks, pools of blood, sounds, and just stay hidden from the killer. The seventh category is interactables, and these are perks that get their values from unique interactions around the trial, like items, chests, hooks, and pallets. The eighth category is survival, and these are perks that help you or your teammates stay alive in the trial for longer through second chances, endurance hits, wiggling out, or recovering from the dying state. And finally, the ninth category is endgame, and these are perks that get the majority or all of their value in endgame. These are all of the perks that will be in each category. So if you're looking for a specific perk or a specific category, you can skip right ahead to that part of the video. And just some quick list conditions before we hop into the rankings. I know some perks could be put into 2 or more categories, but I'm going to be placing each perk in only one category, focusing on the primary use of that perk. So for example, adrenaline could easily be placed in exhaustion or endgame, but since people use it for the endgame value and not the fact that it's an exhaustion perk, it'll be placed in the endgame category. And perk rankings will be comparative only to their own category, so the S tier of one category doesn't necessarily compare to the S tier of another category. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into the rankings. Starting with the exhaustion category, the worst perk on here, and it's going to be in C tier, is head on. This is often forgotten to be an exhaustion perk, but when you rush out of a locker, you actually end up being exhausted with it. And this perk can be pretty good to stun the killer and extend the duration of your chase, or get you out of sticky situations, or even save a survivor if they're getting picked up near your locker. But comparing it to the other exhaustion perks in its category, it's nowhere near as good as any of the other ones, so it's just got to be in C tier. Going up to the B tier, the first perk on here is going to be overcome. When you get injured, you get 2 additional seconds of your injured speed boost, and then that causes the exhaustion status effect. This is a pretty consistent perk because you'll always be getting value out of it every time you get injured, but sometimes when you are getting chased, you don't expect to get injured and you don't use the full value out of that extra speed boost, which is why I think the other exhaustion perks above it will be better because you can control them somewhat. The second perk on B tier is going to be smash hit. When you successfully pallet stun a killer, you break into a 4-second sprint burst, which is 1 second longer than an actual sprint burst, and then you get exhausted. So it basically guarantees you're going to escape that chase because the killer is going to have to wait out the pallet stun, and you're already going to be so far away on the other side of the pallet. But sometimes this perk is pretty difficult to get its value out, and sometimes if you pallet stun the killer, you'll also become injured at the same time. So you'll probably be escaping the chase, but you'll still be injured. Moving up to the A tier, the first perk we have on here is balanced landing. When you fall from a great height, you break into a regular sprint burst, which then causes the exhausted status effect. Making your loop focus around high ground can really get you good value out of balanced landing and put you really far away from the killer. But the problem I have with this perk, and why it's not at the top with all of the other best exhaustion perks, is because this perk is pretty map dependent, and if a map doesn't have any high ground, you just won't be getting much value out of this perk at all. Moving up to the S tier, the first perk we're gonna have on here is dead hard. Whenever you're injured, you press the activate ability button, you get the endurance status effect for half a second, and then you get exhausted. And this perk did get a rework, which was considered a nerf, but it's still super duper strong because it gives you an extra life in a chase if you pull it off successfully, and you get the injured speed boost when you do get it off, which can be fantastic and just ultimately let you escape a chase entirely. The second perk on S tier is going to be Lithe. Lithe is my personal favorite exhaustion perk, but whenever you vault a window or a pallet, you break into a sprint burst and then you get exhausted, which is really good because it basically is a controllable sprint burst. You get to pick pick in a chase when and where to actually vault. And if a killer is right behind you at a window and you vault over it, you're going to gain so much more distance because they're going to have to take the time to vault the window as well. So it gives you a ton of ground to almost even entirely escape a chase. Finally, the best exhaustion perk in DBD is going to be sprint burst. Whenever you're not exhausted and you start running, you break into a sprint burst and then you get exhausted again. And this perk is just really useful in and out of chases because you can travel around the map faster out of chases and you get a huge head start at the beginning of chases. It's really easy to use for beginners, but if you want to get more complex, you can also 99 the exhaustion and use it mid chase, which could be very advanced and catch the killer completely off guard. So it's just overall the best exhaustion perk all around. Moving on to the healing category, the first perk we have on here is going to be solidarity in D tier. Whenever you're injured and healing another survivor without a med kit, half of that heal gets converted to you as well. And this perk isn't great because the criteria to activate this is so specific, and once you do get the value out of it, you only get half of a full heal. So if that other survivor then goes to heal you, it saves probably like 8 seconds in total, so it's just not a big deal at all. The second perk on D tier is going to be autodidact. Autodidact is a skill check healing perk where you start off at minus 25%, and every skill check gains you 1 stack of a bonus 15% skill check progression up to a maximum of 5 stacks. I'm not a huge fan of this perk because when you're starting out healing at the start of the trial, your heals take almost twice the amount of time if you get skill checks, which is really annoying. And if you're not healing too many times throughout the trial, you won't even get the full skill checks, which isn't really great. If you do the math and you get full stacks, you only end up getting 50% skill check progress, which speeds it up by a good amount, but there are better healing perks in this category that have the same heal speed if not faster. Moving up to the C tier, the first perk we have on here is reactive healing. Whenever you're standing near someone that loses a health state, you gain 50% of your missing heal progress. It seems pretty good on paper that it just immediately jumps to 50 if you're at 0, but after you get 2 health states gained and you get to 75%, you're never going to get to a full heal because it just keeps cutting 50% chunks smaller and smaller. You're still going to need somebody or another perk to fully heal you, not to mention that you have to be near someone when they get hit, which is pretty specific. There are just better perks in this tier list. The second perk on C tier is going to be resurgence. Every time you get unhooked, you gain 50% of your heal progress. So similar to reactive healing, you're still going to need another perk or somebody to actually fully heal you, so it'll only really save you a few charges or a few seconds to get full healed, but you still need the heal, so I don't think it's that amazing. The third perk on C tier is going to be better than new. Whenever you fully heal somebody, they get their action speeds boosted by 16% until they take another hit. This can be pretty useful if that survivor then goes and heals other survivors or cleanses or boons a totem. When you read into the fine print and realize that the repair action speed for gens isn't on there, it starts to not get super useful because the gen action speed is definitely the most important one and it's missing from this perk. The fourth perk we have on C tier is going to be renewal. Whenever you fully heal somebody and then you get hooked and then unhooked, you'll be in the broken status effect and then fully heal in 20 seconds. So this perk could be pretty good. For example, if you're getting tunneled or you just do not have time to get healed up, it saves the time by automatically healing you, but the criteria to get this perk is insanely specific, so it'll probably only happen once or no times throughout a trial, so there are just better, more consistent perks to run. The fifth perk we have on the C tier is going to be self-care. Whenever you're injured, you're able to fully heal yourself without a med kit or anybody at 35% the regular heal rate. The fact that you're able to fully heal yourself throughout the entirety of the trial with no help, no other perks, and no med kits can come in pretty clutch sometimes. But the downside of this perk is that it heals you at 35% of the speed, which is super slow, makes you waste so much time healing, and you'd honestly be better off just staying injured because it takes that long. Use this perk cautiously because if you're healing too much times on your own, you're going to be a detriment to your team. The sixth perk on C tier is going to be for the people. Whenever you're in the healthy state, you can immediately heal somebody from the injured or dying state, and then you become injured and broken. And this can be really clutch. For example, if someone is in the dying state and you need to pick them up really quickly, or if somebody's getting tunneled and they're injured, you can apply your health to theirs. But I'm honestly a for the people hater, and the fact that you can't heal yourself for 80 seconds I think is insane, and most of the time it just gets you killed. Unless you're extremely altruistic and you don't care about surviving, I'm not a huge fan of this perk. The seventh perk on C tier is going to be We're Gonna Live Forever. We're Gonna Live Forever lets you heal twice as fast on survivors that are in the dying state. And if you had done an altruistic action prior to that heal, if you fully heal someone from the dying state, they also get the endurance status effect for a little bit. So this perk got a very high fall from grace when it got nerfed and has no more blood points, which is really sad. But the dying state double heal speed can actually be really clutch, is really useful in slug situations. But the problem I have with this perk is that it is so niche and you'll probably rarely get value out of it. And getting that endurance hit, although is very clutch, will also be even less of a chance of getting good value out of it. There are honestly just better perks to run that get more consistent value throughout the trial. Coming into the B tier, the first perk we have on here is Bite the Bullet. Whenever you're healing either yourself or others, the whole action will be completely silent. And if you fail a skill check, it'll also be silent as well. So this can be really useful if you're healing near a killer, and it can help you be really stealthy and the killer won't be able to find you. But most of the time when you are healing, it will be away from the killer. You won't really need the hidden sounds, which is why I think it's borderline B or C tier. The second perk we have on B tier is Guardian. When you unhook a survivor, that survivor gets the haste status effect and pools of blood and scratch marks hidden for a few seconds, and during that time you also see the killer's aura. This is pretty useful if the killer is nearby and is looking to tunnel that survivor, because they're extra fast for extra long, and especially with base kit borrowed time that already has haste applied, this will just be another additional haste. It'll make that survivor really quick and be able to get a huge head start in the tunnel. But like I said, base kit already does have some haste to it, so some can think that this is a little bit overkill. The third perk we have on B tier is going to be Empathic Connection. If another survivor is injured and within a large radius of you, they see your aura, and you also heal all other survivors 10% faster. This perk really shines in the fact that survivors are able to come to you to get healed, and you also heal them faster, and you heal all other survivors in the trial faster, which can be a really nice little bonus. So overall, just keeps survivors healthy in the trial because they'll always come to you when they're injured. The fourth perk we have on B tier is going to be Inner Healing. Whenever you cleanse a totem and you're injured, you can go inside of a locker and then get fully healed within a few seconds, which could be really good because it's basically just an insta heal you'll have whenever you get injured if you had cleansed a totem. Yes, sometimes it does waste a good amount of time cleansing totems, and with the boon meta you don't really want to be cleansing totems, but the fact that you're able to get an insta heal is something that no other perk can offer you, which can keep you very efficient and going back to working on things other than healing. The fifth perk we have on B tier is going to be Reassurance. Whenever you're near a hooked survivor, you can press the activate ability button and it'll pause their hook timer for 30 seconds, which can be really clutch and save that hooked survivor's life. If the killer is face camping, for example, or proxy camping, that extra 30 seconds can mean the difference between you getting the unhook or not. But comparing it to the original Reassurance, it definitely is nerfed. The fact that you can only use it once makes it not as strong, and most of the time you won't even need Reassurance. So I think there are better perks that will get constant value. The sixth perk we have on B tier is going to be Borrowed Time. Whenever you unhook a survivor, the base kit duration of the haste and endurance status effect will be extended by 10 seconds. So this can be really useful if a killer is tunneling, for example. Nobody expects Borrowed Time anymore, and they'll always get the endurance hit off. With BT being base kit nowadays, Borrowed Time can sometimes be seen as overkill, but in endgame, for example, it can really mean the difference between life and death, so I still think it's a pretty decent perk to run. The first perk we have in A tier is going to be Botany Knowledge. Botany Knowledge increases your healing speed by 50%, and it also decreases the item efficiency by 20%, but we're not going to focus on that part. What really shines out of this perk is that you're able to heal survivors 150% faster without a med kit, which if you're in a boon, for example, or you're running other heal speed perks, will let you fly through heals, which will just keep you and other survivors really efficient because they'll be on their way fully healed really quickly. And yes, the fact that it's less efficient med kits kind of stings, but if you were to run an insane med kit with a ton of charges, you'd be able to literally fly through heals, which could be really useful. The second perk we have on A tier is going to be We'll Make It. Whenever you unhook a survivor, you get to heal twice as fast for 90 seconds. This will guarantee that anybody you unhook will leave fully healed really quickly because you can just heal right under hook really fast. And what's really good about this perk is that it's active for 1.5 minutes, which is a ton of time to go and find other survivors to fully heal twice as fast as well. Finally, in S tier, the best healing perk in the game is Boon Circle of Healing. The best part about Boon Circle of Healing is that it allows every survivor in the trial to heal themselves when you're in the boon range at 50% that heal, so it's even faster than self-care. And this just keeps survivors super efficient because when they're injured, they don't have another survivor that needs to go heal them. They can just do it on their own relatively pretty quickly. And if you were already in the boon, the healing speed stacks when you're healing each other, so you can heal super fast. The fact that it just keeps everybody fully healed in the trial will make it super difficult for the killer to get any progress in downs and injuries, which is why it's in the tier of its own. It's by far the best perk on here. Moving on to the gen category, the first perk we have on here is corrective action in D tier. If a survivor working on a gen with you fails a skill check and you have some tokens, that failed skill check will be then converted to a good skill check. Nobody is aiming to fail skill checks, and they're relatively pretty easy to do. Somebody failing a skill check on a gen with you probably happens at most 3 times in a trial, which doesn't really change much. So having a perk tailored to somebody messing up, I don't think is a very great use of a perk slot. The second perk in D tier is going to be Rookie Spirit. Whenever you complete enough skill checks, you get to see the progress of regressing generators throughout the trial, which could be pretty decent information for beginners. But with practice, you're going to be able to know what gens should be regressing around the trial without an extra perk. And running this perk could start stressing you out and just immediately running to every gen that's regressing like a chicken with its head cut off, which sometimes it's honestly just better to let a gen regress and focus on completing the gen you're currently working on. The third perk we have on D tier is going to be Technician. Whenever you fail a skill check, the loud noise notification doesn't go off, but the regression penalty gets increased. Yes, it could be nice to not alert the killer of a loud noise notification. Good killers already know what gens are getting worked on, so the loud noise notification doesn't really help them anyways. And the fact that the gen regresses even more than a normal failed skill check just isn't great at all. And like I said, with corrective action, nobody's trying to fail skill checks, so tailoring to that I don't think is a great perk design. The first perk we have on C tier is going to be Situational Awareness. After you've been working on a gen for a little bit, it gets highlighted to yellow to all other survivors. And if you're working on a generator and the killer downs a survivor, you see the aura of all other survivors for 10 seconds. With the new survivor activity HUD, it's not too difficult to realize who is working on a gen and where that gen is, so that yellow aura is even less useful than it used to be. And seeing the survivors' auras while you're working on a generator isn't particularly useful either. This honestly just got a silent nerf with the survivor activity HUD just not being that useful anymore. The second perk we have on C tier is going to be Blast Mine. After you've repaired a gen for 50% progress, you can basically apply a flashbang on the generator, and if the killer kicks it, they get blinded and stunned and have to re-kick the gen to get its progress depleted. This perk is basically just a meme perk at this point. It just wastes the killer like 5 seconds at most because they just have to kick the generator twice, and that's if the killer kicks the generator. And the fact that after its nerf, if the killer doesn't kick that generator, you still have to do another 50% gen progress on it to get Blast Mine again, I don't think is a great design, so you rarely ever get use out of this perk in a trial. The third perk on C tier is going to be Repressed Alliance. After working on a gen for 45 seconds, you can block that generator for 30 seconds with the entity. This perk could be pretty clutch if the killer is going to kick the gen with pop, for example, or if a gen's about to be completed and you're not able to finish it, it'll just save it from getting regressed. But you have to be working on the gen for a super long time, and most of the time blocking that generator for 30 seconds is a little bit too long. Survivors could have went back to that gen and done more progress even past the killer kick, so sometimes it's to a detriment using this perk. The fourth perk we have on C tier is going to be Quick Gambit. Whenever you're looping a killer really close to a generator, other survivors working on that generator get to work on it a lot faster. This perk can be really clutch if the killer is like hard tunneling you and doesn't realize that a gen right next to you is getting worked on, because those survivors on that gen will fly through it. But the problem is that the killer is most likely going to realize that gen is getting worked on and contest that instead of chasing you, so getting value out of this is going to be very difficult. Moving up to the B tier, the first perk we have on here is Fast Track. You gain tokens every time a survivor gets hooked, up to a maximum of 27 tokens, and every time you complete a great skill check on a gen, it consumes all tokens. 1 token is equal to 1% gen progress, so you can get up to a maximum of 27%, which is actually a sizable amount considering the fact that you don't really have to do anything extra. Survivors just get hooked and that'll just naturally happen. But with that being said, you never want a perk to get value out of somebody getting hooked or dying, and you'd be better off using another gen perk and keeping your survivors alive. The second perk on B tier is going to be Wiretap. Whenever you work on a generator for 33% progress, you can apply Wiretap on the gen, kind of like Blast Mine. If the killer comes near that generator, the killer's aura is revealed to all survivors in the trial. What's really good about this is if you apply it onto a gen that the killer won't kick right away, for example a Killer Shack gen, they'll just keep looping you around and you'll be able to see them basically have wall hacks, which is really useful. Now on top of the fact that all other survivors can see exactly where that killer is good information for them as well. The third perk we have on B tier is going to be potential energy. You can work on the potential energy stacks while you're working on a generator. So it pauses the generator progression and then goes to the potential energy. 1.5 seconds on a gen is equal to 1 stack of potential energy, and you can get up to a maximum of 20 stacks that you can then put back for 20% progress on that gen. You're obviously better off working on the generator, not potential energy. You'll get more progress on it, but this perk can be really useful if you need to apply generator progress on a contested gen. You can work potential energy on a gen that isn't getting contested and then apply it to that contested gen, which could mean the difference between completing the gen if it's the last one, for example. Moving up to the A tier, the first perk we have on here is Overzealous. Whenever you cleanse a dull totem, it gives you 8% repair speed bonus, and whenever you cleanse a hex totem, it gives you 16% repair bonus. If you're staying away from the killer and you're not getting injured, you can go the entire trial just getting a bonus repair speed, which can make you really efficient. And if you're cleansing a hex totem, it makes you ultra efficient, and it's actually low-key a game changer. I know we're not really in a hex meta right now, but if we ever do return to this perk will be even better. The second perk we have on A tier is going to be Deja Vu. Deja Vu lets you see the aura of the 3 closest gens to each other, and those generators that are highlighted get 5% bonus progress on them. Being able to see the 3 gen is really useful because you want to get rid of those gens as soon as you can, so that when you're in late game, you have gens spread out and the killer will be having a hard time countering them. And the fact that you also get to work on those gens faster is really good because those gens are usually contested more often because they're usually in the middle of the map. So being able to be even more efficient on them and completing them is really, really good. The third perk that's going to be on A tier is going to be Hyper Focus. Whenever you hit a great skill check, you get a stack of Hyper Focus up to a maximum of 6. Each stack increases the chance of getting great skill checks, increases the speed of the actual skill check, and best of all, gives you more progress per great skill check. If you're able to consistently hit great skill checks up to the maximum of 6 stacks, you're going to be literally flying through gens because it gives you so much progress as you go. But if you're having a hard time with great skill checks, the tokens do reset every time you don't get a great skill check, so it can be pretty difficult to get the full value sometimes. Finally, the best gen perk in DBD and S tier is going to be Prove Thyself. Whenever you're working on a generator with one other survivor, they get to work on that gen 15% faster, and that works per person up to a maximum of 45% faster if all 4 survivors are working on a gen. So this perk is really good to just gen rush and complete gens really quickly with your team. It's honestly a necessity in this current gen regression meta. And also the nice little cherry on top that you get 100% bonus blood points for the co-op action is really nice. It'll allow you to grind blood points while also grinding gens, which is why this is by far the best perk and it's in a tier of its own. Moving on to the information category, the first perk we have on here is going to be Premonition in D tier. Whenever you're looking at a 45-degree cone of the killer, you get a sound cue, and then the perk goes offline and gets on cooldown. This perk just sucks. I'm sorry. It has a cooldown and the sound cue is just not useful at all, so Spine Chill is better. The second perk on D tier we have is Buckle Up. When you heal a survivor from the dying state, you both get to see the killer's aura for 10 seconds, and the revived survivor gains 10% haste as well. Usually if you're reviving a survivor from the dying state, you know exactly where the killer is anyways, and the haste status effect can be pretty clutch sometimes, but if the killer's close enough, they're going to catch the survivor anyways, so it's just not useful at all. The third perk we have on D tier is going to be Visionary. You get to see the aura of generators within a certain vicinity of you, and every time a gen gets completed, it goes on cooldown. Being able to know where generators are comes with practice. You don't need an aura perk for that, and the fact that this perk goes on cooldown is absolutely useless, so there's just no point in running this perk. The fourth perk we have on D tier is going to be Object of Obsession. Whenever the killer reads your aura, that killer's aura is also shown to you, but if you're the Obsession, which this perk is going to basically guarantee you are, the killer sees your aura for 3 seconds every 30 seconds. You rarely ever get to see the killer's aura, and it's completely random because you don't get to choose when to see the aura. They actually get to choose when they see your aura, and the worst part about it is that they consistently see you every 30 seconds, which is just terrible, and it'll just put a giant target on your back for no reason. Unless you're trying to have a hard time with a killer always chasing you, don't run this perk. Moving up to the C tier, the first perk we have on here is Counter Force. You cleanse totems 20% faster, and every time you cleanse a totem, totem, it stacks another 20% faster. And you also get to see the aura of the furthest totem from the one you just cleansed. If your goal is to cleanse all of the totems in the trial, this is the best perk to do so. But since we're in a boon meta, this isn't really useful. And you also have to find your first totem on your own without any aura ability. So this perk is a very niche usage. Second perk we have on C tier is going to be Aftercare. Whenever you interact with a survivor, whether it's through a hook or a heal, you get to see their aura for as long as until you don't get hooked. So if you aren't getting hooked at all in the trial, you're basically going to guaranteed be able to see the aura of all the survivors throughout the rest of the trial, which would be pretty useful. But getting hooked is inevitable, and the fact that it completely resets and you have to go and interact with all 3 other survivors again makes it so that there's just better information perks because it's just not as consistent. The third perk we have on C tier is going to be Dark Sense. Whenever a generator gets completed, you get to see the aura of the killer when they come within 24 meters of you for 10 seconds. Being able to see the killer's aura for that 10 seconds is pretty useful to get you a good idea of the start of the chase, but 24 meters is so close that they're probably going to be coming to you and you're going to be knowing where they are anyways, so you wouldn't really have needed to see that aura regardless. The fourth perk we have on C tier is going to be Inner Focus. You're able to see survivors' scratch marks, and if a survivor loses a health state near you, you get to see the killer's aura for 5 seconds. Being able to see the scratch marks from a distance can be pretty useful and give you a general idea of where survivors are, but it isn't particularly the most useful aura reading. And being able to see the killer's aura when they hit somebody is also not super useful because you won't really be needing to know where they are there. Moving into the B tier, the first perk we have on here is Clairvoyance. Whenever you cleanse a totem and you're not holding an item, you can consume use out of the perk and be able to see a bunch of things around the trial. It's pretty decent info, and one of the things that sticks out is that you can even see hatch. So if you save this for endgame, it can be pretty clutch. But the fact that you have to find a totem and you only get a certain few seconds out of that use can make it tough to get value out of sometimes. The second perk we have on B tier is going to be Small Game. Whenever you're near a totem and you're looking at it, you get a sound cue. So this is a really fantastic support perk to be able to find totems really easily. But then again, it is pretty niche, and if you don't need to see totems, this perk isn't really useful at all for you. The third perk we have on B tier is going to be Detective's Hunch. Whenever a generator gets completed, you get to see the aura of a bunch of things for a few seconds. And if you're holding a map, all the things you see will get tracked on that map. And you get to see all the useful things that Clairvoyance sees except for hatch. And on top of that, you can also see totems, which is really useful because all the other things on Clairvoyance that you see, like hooks and stuff like that, aren't useful at all. And this activates for all 5 gen completions. So by the end of the trial, if you get to 5 gens, you'll have a really good sense of where things are in the trial. So you get to see less things than Clairvoyance, but the things you do get to see are much more useful, which is why I think it's the superior of the 2 perks. The fourth perk we have on B tier is going to be Spine Chill. Whenever you're in the killer's terror radius, the perk will give a visual terror radius of how close they are to you. And if the killer is directly looking at you with line of sight, the perk also lights up and you get a bunch of action speed boosts. This perk can give you a good sense of how close the killer is to you, and if they're directly looking at you, it'll light up. And the action speeds can be pretty useful. You can't evolve faster anymore, but if you're working on a gen that's almost 99 and you need the repair speed or an exegate speed, it can be really clutch. But the fact that it got nerfed and that the killer has to be directly looking at you probably means that you can see them as well, so it isn't entirely as useful as it used to be. The first perk we have in A tier is going to be Bonds. You get to see the aura of all the survivors within 36 meters of you. It's a pretty simple perk, but it's actually very useful to know exactly where survivors are near you, and you can team up on gens with them. It allows you to be a lot more efficient as a team. It's a very consistent perk that you'll always be constantly getting value out of, which is why I think it separates it from B to A tier. The second perk we have on A tier is going to be Fogwise. Every time you complete a grade skill check on a gen, you get to see the killer's aura for 6 seconds. If you're really good at grade skill checks, you're going to be able to constantly see the killer while you're working on gens. And if you're in a Swift, that basically means that everybody's going to be able to know where the killer is at exact times because you just call it out every time. And if the killer is coming at you, for example, you'll know exactly when they are and how close they are. So it'll just be really useful information for yourself as well. The third perk we have on A tier is going to be Alert. Whenever the killer destroys a pallet, a wall, or a gen, you get to see their aura for 5 seconds. Contrary to other information perks that reveal the killer's aura, the information you're going to get is always really valuable because you'll be able to randomly see the killer in a spot you wouldn't know they were otherwise. And it's really nice because you'll be able to know where they're chasing or what gens they're contesting so you can stop their regression, for example. trial. The fourth perk we have on A tier is going to be Kindred. If another survivor gets hooked, you get to see the aura of all the survivors in the trial. Everybody also gets to see the killer's aura around the hook. And if you get hooked, all survivors can see the aura of each other and see the killer's aura. This perk definitely would have been S tier prior to the survivor activity HUD, but since the survivor activity HUD is here, being able to see the survivors' auras isn't as useful as it used to be. Being able to see the killer's aura after a hook is always really useful information to see their next steps and where they're going next. So I still think this is an amazing perk for the killer side of it. Moving up to the S tier, the first perk we have on here is Empathy. Whenever another survivor gets injured, you get to see their aura within 128 meters for as long as they stay injured. 128 meters is a huge radius. It's basically the entire map for all of the maps. You'll be able to see the survivors when they're injured all the time. And whenever a survivor does immediately get injured, you'll know exactly when they're getting chased and where they're getting chased. It's just really consistent, constant, and useful info all around to also kind of be able to see the killer's whereabouts when they first get an injury and whatnot, which is why it's separated from the A to S tier. And finally, the best information perk in the game is going to be Windows of Opportunity. You get to see the aura of breakable walls, pallets, and windows within 32 meters of you for the entire trial. This is insanely useful in chases in allowing you to know exactly where you should be looping to next to go to the next pallet or to the next window, and it allows you to be so much more efficient in chases and last so much longer because you won't ever be running into a dead zone. And with maps constantly changing and pallets not being in the same spots and windows not being in the same spots, it's really difficult to predict these things sometimes. So always being able to know in chases your next move is really valuable, and why it's the best information perk in the game. Moving on to the boost category, the worst perk on here is going to be Up the Ante in D tier. Up the Ante just increases the luck you get in a trial, and luck is absolutely useless because the only thing it does is help you have a greater chance at unhooking yourself off of hook, and this is already such a minimal chance that this extra additional luck from Up the Ante does nothing. So there's absolutely no reason to use this. It's really bad. Moving up to the C tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Blood Pact. You have a connection with the Obsession, and whenever one or the other are injured, you guys get to see your auras. And whenever you guys heal each other, you guys gain the haste status effect for as long as you guys are within 16 meters of each other. This perk basically just gives you a boosted haste status effect, but you'll get so little value out of it, and it's such a niche use because you have to meet up and then heal with the Obsession. You also have to stay near that Obsession to have it. Sticking two survivors together won't be incredibly useful when you guys are just running around the map. And not to mention, if you somehow end up being the Obsession, for example, if you use DS or something, the perk will just completely deactivate. So the chance of you getting value out of this perk is very little. The next perk we have on C tier is going to be This Is Not Happening. Whenever you're injured, your great skill check success zone will be increased by 30%. So it'll make it super easy to hit great skill checks when you're injured. But unless you're running it in a build with hyper focus, for example, great skill checks are relatively pretty easy to hit without this perk. So this boost isn't a great use in my opinion. Moving up to the B tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Breakout. Whenever you're running within 6 meters of a killer that's carrying a survivor, you get your haste boosted, and that survivor that's wiggling also gets their wiggle progress boosted. So this is really good on an aggressive build where you're trying to get wiggle outs on your teammates and you're trying to do anti-hooks and sabos and stuff like that. But then again, you also have to be really close to the killer and kind of have to dedicate an entire build to this, because if you just randomly slap it on, you won't be getting that much value out of it. So it's only as good as how much value you're willing to put into the anti-hook playstyle. Moving up to the A tier, the first perk we have on here is Open-Handed. All survivor aura reading abilities will get boosted by 16 meters, which can actually be really useful on perks that don't have that big of a range, for example like Kindred. But some perks like Empathy don't get use out of this at all because they already have a massive range. Some perks also like Kindred could be argued that it's just a little bit overkill, but regardless, I think the extra 16 meters can get you just that much more value and increase the value out of all of your information perks by just a little bit more, which is why I think it separates it from B to A tier. The second perk we have on A tier is going to be Desperate Measures. Your unhooking and healing speeds get boosted for every injured, hooked, or dying survivor in the trial, up to a maximum of 56%. This can be relatively useful if you're an altruistic survivor. Being able to unhook that much faster perk can catch a killer off guard if they're face camping and trying to grab you, for example. They'll probably just miss it. And being able to heal that much faster when everybody's injured, for example, is really, really nice. But the fact that this perk does get value when other survivors are struggling means that if nobody's struggling, you'll get no value out of this perk. The third perk we have on A tier is going to be Leader. Whenever other survivors are within 8 meters of you, all of their action speeds are boosted by 25% for as long as they're in your range. The only one that isn't boosted is repairing, but if you're doing a lot of teamwork and you're working with a lot of survivors, it could be really useful. For example, when you're healing with a group of survivors, or you're unhooking with a group of survivors, opening an exit gate. If you're doing things as a team, you can get a lot of value out of this. But if you're kind of more of the rogue solo queue, this perk won't get that much value, but it could be really good in a Swift. Moving up to the S tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Vigil. Vigil increases your recovery speed for a ton of status effects, and like Leader, if a survivor is within 8 meters of you, that recovery speed also gets applied to other survivors. It seems like a pretty random perk, but the best use for this is the exhaustion recovery. If you're comboing this with one or more exhaustion perks, you'll be able to get value out of your exhaustion perks so much more. And with exhaustion perks being the best perks in the game, you want to get value out of those as much as you can. And it's a nice little cherry on top that a bunch of status effects that are really annoying also get recovered that much faster. So it's just overall a very consistent boosting perk that you'll always be getting value out of. And finally, the best boost perk in the game is going to be Resilience. Whenever you're injured, all of your action speeds are boosted by 9%, and this includes repairing. So the fact that you're able to hide away injured from the killer and repair 9% faster is really, really nice. And when you're in chases, being able to vault 9% faster is really good. It'll just make you a really efficient survivor throughout the entire trial for as long as you can stay injured, which is why it makes it the best boost perk in the game. Moving on to the stealth category, the first perk we have on here is going to be self-preservation in D tier. Whenever a survivor gets injured really close to you, your scratch marks, grunts of pain, and pools of blood are suppressed for 10 seconds. This is absolutely useless in my opinion, because if a survivor is getting injured near you, that means that killer is focusing on that survivor, not you, and they don't even know you're there most of the time if you're trying to be stealthy, and that killer will have moved on and kept chasing that survivor with that 10 seconds not doing anything. So this perk just doesn't add any stealth value at all. The second perk we have on D tier is going to be Poised. Whenever a generator gets completed, your scratch marks are hidden for 10 seconds. Usually when a generator gets completed, you're in a completely random spot or you're the one that completed the generator. Most of the time the killer won't be on you. You'll be completely caught off guard by this stealth, and you won't even need the stealth because you won't even be near the killer anyways. So this stealth is just completely useless in my opinion. The third perk we have in D tier is going to be Red Herring. Whenever you repair a generator and you leave it, it'll be highlighted in yellow, and if you quickly go into a locker, it'll put a loud noise notification at that gen. The idea of this perk is to distract the killer to go to that gen instead of your location, but the big flaw is that you don't ever want to attract killers to gens that are getting worked on. If the killer is chasing you, that loud notification won't do anything. And if they weren't chasing you, they'll also not be able to find you because they weren't there at all. This just isn't stealthy at all, and it puts your team at a detriment. So I don't recommend this perk at all. Moving up to the C tier, the first perk we have on here is Iron Will. Your grunts of pain when you're injured are going to be muffled by 75% at tier 3, only if you're not exhausted. So if you're trying to stealth it out with a really loud survivor and you're not running exhaustion perks, it could be pretty decent. But the fact that it's only 75% and not 100% means that killers will still be able to hear you, which is defeating the purpose of stealth. And on top of the fact that if you're running an exhaustion perk, you'll basically almost not be able to ever get value out of this perk, makes it absolutely useless. It's very sad at the downfall this nerfed perk got. The second perk we have on C tier is going to be Diversion. Whenever you're in the killer's terrace for 30 seconds, you're able to get a pebble that you can just throw, and it'll just pop loud notification and face scratch marks at that location. So it's a pretty memey stealth perk, and when it fools killers, it's actually pretty funny seeing them just go nowhere, and it can actually maybe help them lose you, but most of the time they don't really fall for it. And the fact that you have to be in the terrace for 30 seconds is a long time, so you won't get that many pebbles in a trial. It's not that useful, but it's pretty fun. The third perk we have on C tier is going to be Deception. When you're off cooldown and you fast vault a locker, it'll swing the doors and put a loud noise notification at that door, but you don't actually jump in it. The idea behind this is to make the killer think you went inside of the locker, so this definitely has a bigger chance of fooling killers than Diversion, but it's just more or less a meme perk, still, so the stealth value you get out of it isn't super great. Moving up to the B tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Boon Shadow Step. Inside the boon range, survivors with scratch marks and auras are completely hidden to the killer. So if you're in a loop that has a lot of high walls and a lot of ways you can cut the line of sight from the killer, you can actually lose the killer really easily with the hidden scratch marks if they're not able to see you. But then again, you have to be looping basically around the boon totem, and they're probably going to snuff it out and then just be able to see your scratch marks again. And if they're that close behind you that they're chasing you, chances are they're going to be able to still track you. So it's good, but not insanely good, which is why it's on the border of B and C tier. The second perk we have on B tier is going to be Urban Evasion. You crouch walk a lot faster, which if you're trying to be really stealthy, you emit no noise when you're crouching, and crouching fast will at least allow you to traverse a little bit faster when you're crouching. But crouch walking is kind of overkill on stealth in my opinion, and it'll put you into a detriment to your team if you're not doing anything, you're just crouching at the corner of the map. That's why it's just right in the middle of B tier. The third perk we have on B tier is going to be Calm Spirit. You don't alert crows, and anything that would have made you scream, you're completely silent for. And you also cleanse totems and open chests quieter, but you do them slower. The best part of this perk is definitely not being able to scream. With perks like Infectious Fright, for example, you'll just completely counter those and be completely silent. But the downfall of this perk is that you do actions a lot slower, although they are a little bit silent. You're compromising efficiency for stealth, which sometimes isn't the best trade-off. Moving up to A tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Stakeout. Every 15 seconds, you're hidden in the killer's aura and they don't spot you. You gain a stakeout stack, and a good skill check consumes a stakeout stack and converts into a great skill check. So if you're being stealthy and hiding from the killer, this will make you pretty efficient on gens, for example, if you're using all of your stacks on gens. It's especially useful if you're using perks like Hyper Focus. Comboing that with the insane progress on those great skill checks will be really good. So contrary to Calm Spirit, you're not compromising efficiency for stealth, you're getting efficiency from your stealth, which is a lot better. The second perk on A tier is going to be Dance With Me. Off of cooldown, when you fast vault either a window, pallet, or a locker, you don't leave scratch marks for 3 seconds. So if you're comboing this with other vault perks, for example like Lithe, you'll be able to go really far away with no scratch marks, and if you cut the line of sight before the scratch marks are over, the killer's gonna have a really hard time tracking you, which makes you really stealthy and able to escape chases relatively easily. The third perk on A tier is going to be Self-Aware. You're able to see your own scratch marks and walk 20% faster. This is much better compared to Urban Evasion because you already walk faster than you would crouch, and since you walk even faster with this perk, you're actually going to be pretty decently efficient while leaving no scratch marks. And the fact that you're able to see your own scratch marks will also allow you to know when you're able to fully hide from the killer, or if the killer is still tracking you with your scratch marks. So it makes you very self-aware, no pun intended, and it just makes you very stealthy. The fourth perk on A tier is going to be Parental Guidance. Whenever you pallet stun a killer, you leave no scratch mark, pools of bloods, or grunts of pain for 7 seconds. So like Dance With Me, if you quickly cut the line of sight after that pallet stun, you could pretty easily lose that killer in the chase. And if you combo with perks like Smash It that allow you to get even more distance pallet stunning, you're almost going to be guaranteed to lose that killer in the chase and be very stealthy. Moving up to the S tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Quick and Quiet. When you're off of the really short cooldown and you fast vault, you're going to be completely silent and leave no loud noise notification. This is another perk that you get efficiency with stealth, and you're able to do things really quickly but also be stealthy while you do them. And you can completely throw off killers and chases. If you cut the line of sight and you silently vault, they won't know you did, and you'll potentially be able to escape the chase without them even knowing where you went. So it's very stealthy. The second perk we have on S tier is going to be Lightweight. Your scratch marks are spaced a lot more inconsistently, and they disappear 5 seconds sooner at tier 3. Scratch marks are your biggest enemy when you're in stealth, so the fact that they're harder to track for the killer makes it so that if you put up ground in a chase and you stop running, they'll disappear really quickly, and the killer will have no idea where you went if they're tracking you only by scratch marks. So comboing this with perks that allow you to gain distance will make you able to escape chases really easily, and outside of chases, the killer won't be able to spot your scratch marks randomly because they just will disappear so quickly. The third perk we have in S tier is going to be Lucky Break. Whenever you get injured, your pools of blood and scratch marks are suppressed for a minute, and if you go back up to the healthy state or go down to the dying state, the timer gets paused, and every second that you heal a survivor converts back to 1 second gain for Lucky Break. So this perk basically guarantees that the killer's gonna have a really hard time tracking you every time they injure you, and the fact that the timer pauses and you can also regain by healing makes it so that you can extend this stealth not only through the first chase but through through the entire trial, which can keep you very stealthy in chases and allow you to not get caught as easily. Finally, the best stealth perk in the game is going to be Distortion. Whenever a killer tries to read your aura and you have a distortion stack, the aura reading gets blocked and you leave no scratch marks for 10 seconds. And every 30 seconds you're inside that killer's tear radius, you gain back a stack. Your other big enemy in stealth is getting your aura read, and the fact that this perk won't allow that to happen is really nice. If the killer tries to read your aura mid-chase, the fact that you also get no scratch marks for 10 seconds could potentially mean that you can vanish in a chase outright because they were relying on that aura reading, but then they don't see it, and then they also don't see scratch marks anymore, so then they're completely hopeless as to where you went. The fact that you can also regain your stacks means that you can extend this stealth throughout the entire trial, and if you're really paying attention, every time they try to read your aura, you could probably try and guess what perk they tried to read your aura with. After a hook, if you consume a stack, that means they probably have BBQ. So it's not only a really good stealth perk, but a really good information perk, and is why it's the best stealth perk in the game. Moving on to the interactables category, the first perk we have on here is going to be Breakdown in C tier. Every time you get unhooked, the hook you got unhooked at gets broken for 180 seconds, and you also see the killer for 6 seconds. The interaction here is breaking the hook, and this could be pretty useful if it was a scourge hook, but other than that, there's always plenty other hooks that killers can go to, so it's not incredibly useful, especially the fact that it spawns back. The second perk we have in C tier is going to be Any Means Necessary. This allows you to reset a dropped pallet, and then you have a cooldown for a minute. So the interaction here is being able to lift pallets, so this can be really clutch if the killer leaves behind pallets unbroken. You can then reuse them, and it's really good on Killer Shack if that happens, but most of the time that almost doesn't ever happen, and killers are usually pretty good with breaking pallets, so you'll probably almost rarely get value out of this one. The third perk on C tier is going to be Saboteur. The interaction here is being able to sabotage hooks in 2.5 seconds without a toolbox, and whenever the killer picks up a survivor, you get to see the aura of the hooks near them, and you get to differentiate the difference between scorch hooks and normal hooks. So it's also a nice little information perk and be able to see if the killer does have scorch hooks, but usually getting a successful sabotage is really difficult, and you're probably only going to be able to get that at max 1 or 2 times in a trial if you're devoting your entire playstyle to it. It definitely is a must-have on Saboteur builds, but other than that, if you're running it on its own, it's not very useful. Moving up to the B tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Pharmacy. Whenever you're injured and you open a chest, it guarantees a green medkit, and you're also able to unlock the chest faster and quieter. So the interaction here is with chests. It's really nice if you really need a med kit, but at the same time, it can also be really annoying if you don't want a med kit, because every chest you go to is going to be a green med kit. So you're going to have to find a way to heal yourself without opening the chest if you want something other than a med kit out of it. If you're only looking to stack up a million green med kits in your inventory, this is a great perk to do it with. The second perk on B tier is going to be Residual Manifest. The interaction here is also with chests, because whenever you rummage through an open chest, the first one you're guaranteed a common flashlight. Every time you blind a killer, you'll also inflict them with 30 seconds of blindness. This perk is really good to farm flashlights compared to Pharmacy that's good for farming medkits, and being able to inflict the blindness aspect is a nice little cherry on top, which can be pretty annoying to the killer sometimes if they have a lot of aura reading perks. The third perk on B tier is going to be Flashbang. The interaction here is with lockers and flashbangs. Every time you work on a gen for 50% progress, you can go inside of a locker and immediately craft a flashbang, which acts exactly like a firecracker. You can drop it and it can blind the killer. This is a really fun perk to use in my opinion. Flashbangs are really difficult to use, but if you're able to pull them off consistently, they're very, very fun, and you're probably going to be able to craft multiple throughout the trial. Being able to try and pull off flashbang saves is really useful, and it's really clutch for the survivors that you're trying to save. Moving up to the A tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Ace in the Hole. The interaction here is with chests and the items that you get. They're always going to have add-ons on them. You're guaranteed one add-on, and you have a smaller chance of getting a second add-on, and if you escape, the add-ons also stay, which is a nice little cherry on top. So if you're trying to farm items and you're also trying to farm add-ons at the same time, this can be really good. And if you're trying to look for items in the trial, this will make the items a lot better and a lot more useful. The second perk we have on A tier is going to be Appraisal. You start the trial with 3 tokens, and you can rummage through 3 open chests to get an additional item. So the interaction here is with chests and the items that you get. You're able to get 3 extra items out of 3 chests chest that you open. So if you're looking to farm the best items possible, this will give you the chance of getting the best items because you just get more items. And if you're trying to use the most items possible in a trial, this will also be the perk to do it because you get 3 additional ones for free. The third perk we have on A tier is going to be Streetwise. The efficiency of your items is increased by 25%, and if other survivors within 8 meters of you, their items will also be more efficient. So the interaction here is with items, and this will just make your items that much better and last much longer. And the fact that teammates are also able to get value out of this, if you're working on a gen with them and you both have toolboxes, for example, you guys will fly through that gen, being that you're just more efficient with your items. Moving up to the S tier, the first perk we have on here is Plunderer's Instinct. You're able to see the aura of chest and drop items within 32 meters of you, and when you're opening a chest, you also have a considerably better chance of getting a rarer item. So the interaction here is with chests and items, and if you're looking to get those in a trial as fast as possible and you're doing a loot build, this is a must-have because you not only find the items faster, you also get better and rarer items. And I'll also put up the percentages Plunderers increases the rarity by, so as you can see, it's actually really good. So if you're trying to get really good items, that's why it's a step up from A to S tier. The best perk in the Interactables category is going to be Built to Last. Whenever you have a depleted item, you can go into a locker and it'll replenish the charges on that item by 99%, and every time you do that, it decreases the charges by 33%. So the interaction here is with lockers and items and extending the life of your items by so much. If you do the math, you're able to get 198% bonus progression on the item, so you're able to get 298% on the item that you were having. So this perk is really good if you're bringing your own really good item in a trial, for example like a purple or a green. You'll be able to get so much more value out of it because you're able to focus your add-ons not on charges but rather making that item better, not last longer, because Built to Last has got you covered on that, which is why it's the best interactable perk in DBD. Moving on to the survival category, the first perk we have on here is going to be No Mither in D tier. No Mither keeps you broken and injured the entire trial, but you give off no pools of blood, your grunts of pain are quieter, you can recover fully from the dying state, and you recover faster. This kind of goes against survival because you stay injured the entire trial, so this perk sucks for that because you only have 1 health state. This is actually an anti-survival perk, but this perk really only fit the survival category because of the other bonuses you have around it. And if you make a build surrounding No Mither and maximizing the positives of the build, and you're able to loot for a really long time and stay away from the killer, you're actually able to survive a little bit better than if you had just run No Mither with nothing else. The second perk we have on D tier is going to be Slippery Meat. Slippery Meat allows you extra chances to unhook yourself at a greater luck percentage. You don't ever really want to try and unhook yourself because it will probably end you up in the second hook state. But not only that, Slippery Meat sucks because it doesn't even give you a 50% chance at escaping if you use all the attempts. It's somewhere around 40%, so the fact that it's not even a 50-50 chance just makes this perk so bad, and just don't use this. Moving up to the C tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Medal of Man. Whenever you take 3 protection hits, the next time you're injured and you take another hit with Medal of Man, it'll become an endurance hit. So again, like No Mither, the survival aspect is the positive in the endurance hit you can take. If you're trying to protect your survivors like crazy, that can actually be a really nice protection hit and clutch up. But then again, you have to take 3 hits prior to this, and the fact that if you fully heal after using your endurance hit, the killer will see your aura, just puts a huge target on your back, and you'll probably end up dying exactly like No Mither. The second perk we have on C tier is going to be Boon Dark Theory. Inside the boon, all survivors gain 2% haste status effect, which can be pretty nice in theory when you're looping around that boon. It'll be harder for the killer to catch you because you're just a little bit faster, but then again, it is only 2%, which is almost minute, and you have to be looping in a small range, which is the boon. So I don't think this is a great survival perk at all because it just doesn't do much. The third perk we have in C tier is going to be Boon Exponential. Any survivor inside of the boon range can recover 100% faster and fully recover from the dying state. On paper, this seems really good, and when you do get value out of it, it's insane value where it basically gives everybody unbreakable in the trial. But then again, when someone gets into the dying state, the chance of them being inside of that boon range and enough time to actually fully recover without the killer picking them up is almost slim to none, and you'll probably only get value out of this like 1 out of 20 games. So there are better perks that will get more value on this tier list. The fourth perk we have on C tier is going to be Kinship. If you're on hook in the struggle phase and a survivor comes within 16 meters of your hook, your struggle timer will pause for 34 seconds. In its best use, this can definitely mean the difference between life or death and a survivor actually saving you, but you can only get value out of this if you're in the struggle phase, which means only once per trial. And usually if you need to get value out of this perk, it means the killer's face cam camping and you're dead anyways, so you won't be getting value out of this perk much, but when you do, it is pretty nice. Moving up to the B tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be tenacity. When you're in the dying state, you become a worm basically, and you're able to crawl faster, you're able to recover while crawling, and your grunts of pain are also quieter. This is more or less a fun survival perk, but if the killer decides to slug for a few seconds, you're able to quickly crawl away and then potentially have the killer lose you and not have any idea where you went, and then a survivor can come and help you. On its own, it's not incredibly useful because you aren't able to actually fully recover from the dying state, but on a wiggle out build or a power struggle build, this is a must-have. The second perk in B tier is going to be flip-flop. Whenever you're in the dying state, 50% of your recovery progress will be converted to wiggle progress, so this can be really useful if you're able to recover a really long time before the killer picks you up, and if you're far from hook, chances of you wiggling out are a lot better. And similar to tenacity, on its own it's not amazing because you don't really recover that fast, and killers will usually pick you up pretty quickly, but it's a must-have on a power struggle or wiggle out build. The third perk on B tier is going to be soul guard. Whenever you get revived from the dying state, you get the endurance aspect for 8 seconds, which will allow you to just take an extra hit and potentially escape. And if you're cursed by a hex totem, you're able to recover yourself from the dying state as long as the hex is standing. So this can be really nice in a sluggy situation. If the killer is constantly targeting the person in the dying state, this can make you clutch up and escape from the area and away from the killer. And it's really nice if there's a hex standing. We're not in a hex meta right now, so you'll probably rarely get value out of this part of the perk, but it's a nice little cherry on top when it does happen. Moving up to the A tier, the first perk we have on here is to be power struggle. When you get picked up by the killer and reach 15% wiggle progress, you're able to drop pallets near you and escape the killer's grasp. This is a really fun survival perk because if a killer does accidentally walk over a pallet on the way to a hook, this allows you to just escape and not get hooked. On its own, it's pretty difficult to get value out of, but if you're making a build around this perk in combo with flip-flop and tenacity, for example, you'll be able to get a lot more value out of it by crawling under the pallet and then dropping it as soon as you get picked up. The second perk on A tier is going to be deliverance. If you get a safe unhook before your first hook, you're able to unhook yourself at a 100% chance, and then you're just going to be in the broken status effect for a really long time after that. So this is also another very fun survival perk where you don't need to rely on other survivors to unhook yourself. And with base kit borrowed time being a thing, if you're in a really sticky situation where the killer is face camping, you'll at least have a little bit of protection against that. And if you combo with other perks like off the record, you're gonna have even more endurance, and it can be really clutch if nobody else can come and unhook you. Most of the time, you're probably able to just wait it out for another survivor to come and unhook you, but in situations where no other survivor can come and you're on your own, this can be really clutch. It can mean the difference between going to the second hook or even dying. The third perk we have on A tier is going to be boil over. When you get picked up by the killer, the struggle effects are increased by 80%, and the aura of any hook near the killer is hidden. What's really nice about this perk is that it also got a silent buff with the new wiggle skill checks. The wiggle skill checks now also induce struggle effects, so if you hit a great skill check, it brings it to 100% struggle with boil over, which makes it really difficult for the killer to actually walk in a straight line. If they're trying to walk through a tight door or in between tight objects, they'll get stuck and allow you to get that much more wiggle outs and not get hooked. Moving up to the S tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Decisive Strike. After getting unhooked, this perk stays active for 60 seconds as long as you don't do a conspicuous action, and if you get down and picked up again and you hit a difficult skill check, you escape the killer's grasp and stun them for 3 seconds. This perk did get a nerf, but it's still really nice if you're getting tunneled because it will grant you a second chance. It will give you a little bit of a distance from the killer into starting a new chase. This is always a very safe perk in the tunnel meta that we're in because it's one of those perks that if you don't get value out of it, that's good, and if you do get value out of it, it's also good because you're able to stay alive in the trial for a little longer, which is a very rare survival perk aspect where you always want to get value out of it. This one, it's okay if you don't, which is why it separates it from A to S tier. The second perk we have on S tier is going to be Unbreakable. This allows you to recover from the dying state faster, and once per trial fully recover from the dying state. You won't get value out of this too many times a trial, but if you do get value out of it, it's going to be super clutch if nobody is able to come rescue you in the dying state in a slug situation, for example. And the fact that you're also just able to recover faster is really convenient if other survivors are coming to revive you. So like DS, it's okay if you don't get value out of this because it means you didn't need it, and if you do get value out of it, it's just super clutch. And finally, the best survival perk in DBD is going to be Off the Record. Every time you get unhooked, this perk activates for 80 seconds, and as long as you don't do conspicuous actions, you're going to have the endurance status effect, and if you get hit, it'll just be like taking an extra hit. And regardless of the conspicuous actions, you'll have 0 grunts of pain, and your aura won't be red for that full 80 seconds. So this perk is really nice if you're getting tunneled, and you'll just be able to take an extra hit and extend the chase even more and potentially even escape it. And not only that, regardless of the conspicuous actions, you're also a lot more stealthy in that you're hard to track from the killer, because you're also having a pre-nerf Iron Will and also a full distortion. It just keeps you in the trial that much longer, because it also activates after every single unhook except an endgame. So it's by far the best survival perk in DBD. Moving on to the endgame category, the first perk we have on here is going to be low profile and C tier. Whenever you're the last survivor in the trial that's not in a dying state, hooked, or dead, you have no pools of blood, scratch marks, or grunts of pain for 80 seconds. You could get value out of this before endgame, but it'd be very rare to do so. And the primary reason you run this perk is when you're the last survivor in a trial and you're looking for hatch. If you're ever in a sticky situation and you were injured, you're going to be really hard to track and you're going to be really stealthy, and it'll just give you a better chance of finding hatch. But then again, in endgame, the chance of you being the last survivor and also needing the stealth value out of this if you were injured instead of healthy, you're very rarely going to get value out of this, and there's just better endgame perks to run. The second perk on C tier is going to be Soul Survivor. Every time a survivor dies in a trial, you gain 1 stack, and each stack is 24 meters where the killer can't read your aura up to a maximum of 72. And if you're the last survivor standing, your generator speed is increased by 75%, and your exit and hatch opening speeds are increased by 50%. You'd mainly want to run this perk for the endgame value, because you don't want a perk that gets value out of people dying in the trial and getting value there. It wouldn't really make sense. It's not super good value. The good value is when you're the last survivor standing and in endgame, where you're able to finish maybe the last gen and then stealth it out to go open an exit gate really quickly or try and find hatch. It just gives you a little bit more options in endgame because you're that much more efficient. But then again, the chance of you needing the value of being the last standing is very rare, so they're just better endgame perks. Moving up to the B tier, the first perk we have on here is to be Left Behind. Whenever you're the last survivor standing, you get to see the aura of hatch within 32 meters of you. So if you're looking for hatch and you're doing a hatch build, this is a must-have, and it'll make you find hatch so much easier. But then again, in endgame, there are more than just finding hatch. There's also exit gates and trying to save your other survivors, so there are still better perks than this. But if you're going for a hatch build, this is a must-have for sure. Moving up to the A tier, the first perk we have on here is No One Left Behind. Once you get to endgame, this perk activates, and you unhook and heal 50% faster. You get 100% bonus blood points in the altruism category, and any survivor you do unhook gains the haste status effect for 10 seconds. So if you're trying to save all survivors from endgame hooks, this is a must-have, because you're going to be so much more efficient in every aspect of saving that survivor and helping that survivor with haste, and be able to unhook them faster and quickly healing other survivors so that you're all fully healthy when going back to that endgame hook. So this is a one-stop shop for endgame saves. The second perk we have on A tier is going to be Wake Up. Once you get to endgame, the execute auras are highlighted to you basically across the entire map, and whenever you're opening exit gate, your aura is shown to all other survivors, and you also open the exit gate 25% faster. The best part about this perk is the 25% faster exit gate speeds. If the killer is patrolling exit gates, this can really mean the difference between opening it and not opening it. Other survivors can see you opening the gate. They can also see that on the survivor activity HUD, but the fact that they know which exit gate to run to is very useful as well. So if you're trying to help everybody out, you can also 99 both exit gates really quickly and then go back to help. So it's just a great perk to have in endgame. Moving up to S tier, the first perk we have on here is going to be Adrenaline. Once you reach endgame, you get a mega sprint burst and heal a health state, whether it's from the dying state to injured or injured to healthy, and then you get the exhausted status effect. This perk can come in super duper clutch. For example, if you're in a chase while endgame activates, you can heal up and get a huge distance on the chase, which buys a ton of time for people to open exit gates or you to even escape. Or if you are in the dying state, it fully revives you on your own, which can be super clutch. And yes, the value you will get is very rare at times, but in an endgame build where you actually want to reach it and then do really good in endgame, this will just give you a good head start at the very beginning of endgame, which is what separates it from A to S tier. Finally, the best endgame perk in the game is going to be Hope. Once you reach endgame, you gain 7% haste for the entirety of endgame. This is by far the most consistent endgame perk on here, and you'll always be getting out of that no matter what if you reach endgame. And it'll make you much more dominant in chases because the killer will have a harder time catching you. You'll also be able to traverse the map faster to exit gates and to go to unhook survivors. And if you get unhooked, you'll also be able to run to exit gate faster. So overall, a super consistent, safe, and really good valuable unhittable perk in endgame, which is why it's the best endgame perk in DBD. So I'm just recording this new segment as the 6.6.0 PTV just dropped, and there's 6 new survivor perks in this update. As these are tentative and they're still in the PTV, I'm not going to put them into the official tier list, but I'm going to really quickly explain where I think they would go once the live build goes out. Background player is an exhaustion perk that gives you 6-second sprint burst after you unhook a survivor. And with that being said, I would put this into the B tier of the exhaustion category, because usually when you unhook and you need the sprint burst, you usually want to stay and take protection hits for the person you unhook. And if you didn't need the exhaustion, that means the killer isn't there and you should probably just heal the survivor. So this isn't super useful, but it could come in clutch sometimes, which is why it's probably near the end of B tier. Friendly competition is a generator perk where if you finish a gen with another survivor, you guys both get 5% faster gen repair speeds for 75 seconds. And I would put this into the A tier of the gen category, because if your main focus is working on gens the entire trial and you focus on working on gens with other survivors, you're going to be getting a lot of value, not only for yourself and working on gens faster, but also other survivors can go off and work on other gens faster. So it just allows you to gen rush a lot better. There's 2 perks in the boost category. There's teamwork collective stealth and teamwork power of 2. With collective stealth, when another survivor heals you, if you guys stay near each other, you guys leave no scratch marks. And if you guys leave each other, then it deactivates. And I would put this in D tier, because if you're running together, the killer is probably going to really easily be able to see you guys even without scratch marks, so it isn't really useful at all. And power of 2, if you heal another survivor, you guys both have the haste status effect until you guys leave each other. And I would put this perk in C tier. It's almost an exact carbon copy of Blood Pact, which is why it's ranked similar to it. Cut Loose is a stealth perk where if you're in a chase and you fast vault, that first one is going to be silent, and for the next 6 seconds, if you vault again, it'll be silent, and every time you vault, that 6 seconds resets. So I would put this perk in B tier, because if you're just fast vaulting continuously in a chase, they're all going to be completely silent, and it's going to make the killer have a hard time keeping track of you. But usually you don't want to be vaulting that many times to get value out of it, because then you're just going to block a bunch of windows. So that's why it's just right in the middle of B tier. Blood Rush is a survival perk where if you're on death hook, healthy, and exhausted, you press your activate ability button and then you become injured and your exhausted meter goes away, and then you have the broken status effect, and in 20 seconds you regain your healthy state, and this perk can only be used once. So I would put this perk at the top of A tier, borderline S tier, because if you're on death hook and you really need the extra exhaustion, this could literally save your life, and you're able to get value out of your exhaustion perks twice in one chase potentially, so it can be super clutch. But if you mess this up, it most likely means you're gonna die, which is why it's almost an S tier and why I think it's just A tier. But it's gonna be super fantastic, and I'm excited to see how this works in the live build. Now we can continue on with the video with past me. So yeah guys, those were all the survivor perks ranked by category. Let me know your thoughts of all the tier lists I ranked down in the comments below, and also let me know if you'd want to see more really big videos like this, ranking a ton of things in a mega tier list. This is the first time I've ever done this, and this is probably going to end up being the longest video on my channel by far. So if you like these long form videos, let me know in the comments below. So yeah guys, that's been the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you're new. This has been Sharpshaw, and I will see you guys in the next video. You know, after 3 hours of recording, I can't even be mad about the voice crack.